Welcome to the Elite Life Podcast with your hosts, Trisha and Kylie. Here, we guide you on a journey of personal and professional transformation, revealing the secrets to success. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, join us as we unlock the doors to the elite world of growth, grit, and grace. So, let's dive in.
Hey there, Elite Lifers. Welcome back to another episode of the Elite Life Podcast, where we bring you all the latest on living your best life. I'm Trish, and with me as always,
it's Kylie. I'm here too. Hi. I got to join you today. She asked me to come back. It astounds me every time she's like, hey, are you coming? And I'm like, you want me to come back?
Well, it would be weird if I just talked to myself.
I don't know. I feel like you do that a lot, probably.
Yeah.
It's okay.
It's okay.
It's fine. Today we're diving deep into a hot topic that's been shaking up the real estate world. The recent lawsuit against the National Association of Realtors, hereinafter NAR. Let's get right into it because there's so much to cover. Trish, give our listeners a quick rundown of exactly what's been happening with this lawsuit.
Yeah, sure. So NAR, National Association of Realtors, it's the largest trade association of real estate professionals in the United States. So what does that mean? You have this group of individuals who wield considerable influence over the market. They make policies and regulations that shape the landscape of all real estate transactions, from setting standards for how agents conduct themselves. They control access to the multi-list system, which is where all of us realtors list our properties. It's the primary database that's used by all agents to share these properties. And I mean, a lot of people argue that NAR's dominance has created barriers for entry to new competitors and hindered innovation in the industry. And I have to say, I don't disagree. They make us realtors be members of the National Association of Realtors. So if I want to be able to properly take care of my clients, I have no choice but to pay the National Association of Realtors money and allow them to do whatever they want and govern however they want. It's kind of like the government. Like, you got to pay taxes and then you got to do what they say regardless. And that's it.
Yeah, and one thing to point out is central to the Department of Justice allegations is the contention that NAR's rules and policies stifle competition, right? And this has resulted in artificially inflated commission rates for home sellers, and traditionally real estate commissions have been calculated as a percentage of the sale price with most, I would say the standard is about 6%. And this model, critics say, imposes a substantial financial burden on sellers and discourages price negotiation. But moreover, NAR's really stringent regulations regarding commission sharing agreements between agents really further limits the flexibility and transparency in pricing.
Okay, so let's break this down and make it plain, as Pastor Stephen Furtick would say.
Thank you so much, because I'm, in the grand scheme of things, still relatively green. Pretty wet behind the ears when it comes to real estate, even though I've been in the game since 2018. And I'm still, as I'm reading all of this, I'm calling Trisha and I'm like, oh my God, the world is coming down. And she's like, it's not.
Well, and I think it's difficult because first and foremost, like you mentioned the words, the standard is around 6%. There's a rule that we're not allowed to say standard, right? They don't want, by they, NAR, the National Association of Realtors, and the world in general, doesn't want to allow realtors to set a quote unquote standard commission rate. Like, that's a no-no. So a realtor is not allowed to go into a listing appointment and say, well, the standard is 6%. That's like the biggest no-no there is on the planet.
So when we're playing these verbiage games,
yes,
and the seller says, well, what do most people do, or what's the standard? Are we able to say, most sellers offer 6%?
This is where it gets complicated, right?
Okay.
It's the language game. So what we
I love the world we live in now with the words and not words.
Words matter, right?
Hashtag
So
1984.
So we are supposed to respond with, we are never allowed to say there is a quote unquote standard. All commissions and monies are always negotiable. What I often see in the multi-list system is 3% being paid to the buyer's agent. However, again, you need to know that number is always negotiable. And then like the fact that what you said earlier, like this is causing undue stress on the sellers. Here's what people need to understand, right? The sellers are the ones that are making all the money. I have a house and I'm going to get $100,000 at the closing table, right?
More than that usually.
Right. So you're getting that $100,000 and then you're paying out the buyer's agent and the seller's agent, which let's actually clarify that too. When you enter into a listing contract with a realtor, right? You're my client, Kylie. I'm your listing agent. You are agreeing to pay my brokerage, let's say 5%, because we don't want to be standard, right?
Sure.
We're not going to use the word standard anymore. We're not going to do that. So let's say we talked and we negotiated, we're going to pay 5%, right? So you're going to pay Elite Realty 5%. And then I, as Trisha Dork, broker owner of Elite Realty, will go to the multi-list system and place your property on there, and I will give part of my 5% away to a buyer's agent for helping me to collaborate and get my client's house sold.
That's how it works.
That's how it works, right? Now, what has happened is all of these people, these class action lawsuit people, have gotten together and said, well, no, people are saying that there's a standard and they're setting this undue stress on the sellers. But when the seller pays the commissions to their listing agent, and then they go and buy a house, right? Because if you're selling a house, you probably have to buy a house. You then aren't paying commission. So yes, you pay it here, but then you don't pay it there. So you're getting both advantages, right? As the seller. So when we break this down, right, National Association of Realtors, if you're a realtor, you have to be part of them to be able to list on the multi-list system. They decide every single rule and regulation that goes on with the multi-list system. So they're basically a dictator. And then we just have to do whatever they say, right? And then they get these attorneys. Part of your National Association of Realtor dues is they pay for these attorneys to go and quote unquote fight for your rights. However, what has happened is they created this class action lawsuit. The sellers are mad that they paid these commissions. Realistically, they're mad because in California, they're charging 7% on $10 million homes. So they're making $700,000 on one house. Okay. So now that's affected all realtors in the entire United States, because now the JOD, the Justice Department, they were originally the ones that wanted buyers to have their own agents, because if you are the listing agent, you have a duty to take care of the seller. So the justice system said the buyers should have their own agents. They need to have their own representation.
Exactly. Right? Just like when you go to court, like if you're getting divorced, you can't have the same attorney represent the husband and the wife. There's a conflict of interest.
Yes.
Because you cannot negotiate on behalf of the seller if you're also trying to negotiate on behalf of the buyer. It's not a thing.
Right. You can't split yourself in half and say, I'm going to look out for your best interest and your best interest, right? Because
could you imagine how that would look? Like you're sitting at the table and you're like, my client wants $5,000 in concessions. No, my client will not do that. Let's do $3,000. Nope, I want $4,000. Like it's not a real thing.
Right. And that's basically what the justice system decided. And now they're basically going backwards and saying, never mind, this whole lawsuit that it comes down to, now they're saying, okay, to appease you people, we're going to give you, billions of dollars, number one, which is really what it's all about, right? It's all about the money. So the people that join the class action lawsuit, they get money. And this will close down anybody else suing realtors or the National Association of Realtors or anybody else. They want to shut down all the future litigation. And by doing so, they're going to take out of the multi-list system the space where listing agents put in how much money
they're offering
of their own commission to the buyer's agent. So this is where it's kind of crazy, because you're saying that I'm not allowed to decide and disclose to the world how much I'm going to give out of my commission. Now, they're not saying I can't give it. So I can still go on my listing appointment and have this whole conversation with the seller and say, hey, if you do decide to pay 5% commission and I offer 3% of my commission to a buyer's agent, very likely more people are going to be able to come in and look at your house. Because why? Because more people will qualify to be able to buy your house. Because here's the biggest caveat, okay? If you are a veteran and you are using your VA loan, you're not allowed to pay real estate commissions. So guess who's going to be left holding the bag after this lawsuit is done? Veterans and low-income home buyers, because they can't pay realtors. And now this media frenzy that they have created is basically trying to tell sellers that you no longer got to pay a buyer's agent, right? Which you weren't paying the buyer's agent anyways. You were paying your listing agent. Your listing agent was giving part of their money to the buyer's agent. Now they're making sellers believe you don't got to do that anymore. Just pay your agent and the buyer will pay their own agent.
That's what they were doing to begin with. They were paying their own damn agent.
Well, now, if I'm a veteran and I go out in the marketplace and I want to buy a house, and now all these sellers say, I'm only paying my agent, I'm not going to give you enough money to compensate the buyer's agent. The buyer must pay their own agent. Well, I'm a veteran, I'm screwed. I'm not allowed to pay my own agent, and my agent won't get paid by the seller, so they're not going to go show me that house. So how do I get a house? How do I get fair representation? How am I supposed to get fair and equal representation if I'm a veteran who is not allowed by my mortgage to pay a buyer's agent? And now the sellers have been told, you don't pay the buyer's agent either. Now who's screwed? The veterans and the low-income home buyers who barely had enough money for their down payment and their closing costs already, and now you want them to come up with another 3%.
So do you think, just riffing here, do you think that there could be another situation where these VA buyers or like someone from that group can step up and say, okay, well, by implementing this regulation, you have now discriminated against my client?
Yes. So here are the pivots, right? Because I'm sure that if you're in real estate right now, you're screaming at the radio. 50% are screaming at the radio. Their cell phone, right, where they're streaming this from, going, no, it's all going to be okay. I'm not saying it's not going to be okay. So the ways around this that have been stated is, okay, well, we're not allowed to put the commission in the MLS anymore, but we're still allowed to offer it. Okay, so
do you throw that in the disclosures?
That's what we don't know. Are you allowed to put it in the disclosures? So the videos that have came out so far have said that it's not going to be allowed to be printed anywhere. So then you couldn't print it in the disclosures. You couldn't print it in the MLS, because some people have been like, oh, just put it in the comments instead of that little section that says the commission. We'll just put it in the comments. Well, if you read the literature on it, you're not going to be able to put it in the comments. You're not going to be able to put it in the disclosures, according to the literature that's been released so far. So that would leave buyer's agents to have to call every listing agent and say, are you going to offer part of your commission? And if they say no, the next question is, okay, is your seller, this is the big workaround everybody's going to talk about, is your seller offering seller concessions? So if the seller offers 3% seller concessions, then the buyer can, in essence, pay their realtor's commission out of those seller concessions. But again, you come back to the VA buyers, they're not allowed to pay real estate commissions. There's not allowed to be any sort of money on a closing disclosure to a realtor, no admin fee, no commissions paid by a buyer. So the concession situation works for regular conventional or FHA home buyers. But again, there's no workaround for a VA buyer unless the seller is still going to pay the listing agent enough money so that the listing agent can offer the buyer's agent some commission. Now, we already see So it could work, right? We do have a workaround.
Okay.
The seller is still allowed to pay the listing. And this is what, people that are not in the fear camp are going, just go to your listing presentations, just do them like you always did, provide value, explain that, if you offer the 3% to the other agent, more people are going to show your house, more things are going to be done, blah, 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 blah. So are a lot of sellers going to be like, okay, fine, just do it like you always did? Sure. But then if your seller is one that says no, okay, well, now you're not able to offer any commission to a buyer's agent. So that's less buyers that are coming through the door, because as much as we want to say, right, all the realtors will still show your house because they need to look out for their clients. Nobody works for free on this planet, okay? And the people that are like, oh, well, you should still just do it. Well, do you do your job for free?
No.
I don't know anybody who goes and works for free, especially the stress and the time and the energy that goes into being a realtor. It's an open eyes to close eyes job. It is a highly stressful job. It is a nonstop job.
Yeah.
And when you're working for veterans and they're already discriminated against in the marketplace. There's no way to say they're not. When we go into a highest and best situation, 8 out of 10 times, if your client is a VA client, they're taking a cash offer, a conventional offer, an FHA offer, any of those offers before the VA offer, because they're saying, okay, well, VA is a more risky client because they're zero down. And this isn't me saying, this is the industry. You see it all the time. I very much look out for veterans. We have a lot of veteran programs. We waive our admin fees for veterans. I'm just saying the industry as a whole, if you go into a realtor group, this is what you see, right?
Yeah.
Out in the marketplace. Definitely not with us. But it's what has everybody so heated, because these poor veterans who have fought for our freedom and done everything that they were supposed to do, and they get the benefit of having a zero down mortgage, they're already being discriminated by other agents and sellers by accepting their offers last most of the time, not all of the time, but most of the time. And now you're saying, how are they going to compensate their agent? How are they going to get an agent to want to work for them and take care of them if that agent maybe can't get paid? And that's the big problem here, is you have a group that's already had such a rough go of it. The group that should have the easiest go of it.
Exactly.
And now you're making it even harder for them. You're making it harder for veterans. You're making it harder for home buyers. And you're making it harder for buyer's agents, who are the ones that are out there hustling anyways. Like,
Exactly.
I don't care who you are. It's easier. It is easier to be a listing agent all day long than it is to be a buyer's agent. If I'm a listing agent, I'm going to my listing appointment. I'm putting my sign in the ground. I am doing my marketing. I'm still providing a ton of value.
But you're not spending 10 hours driving across the state, showing homes, negotiating, I will tell you,
gas
in-
is expensive.
putting an offer together, if you're doing it correctly, you have a package that you're sending that's about 20 pages long, between the offer, all the addendums, especially if you're FHA or VA, plus you've got all the disclosures, plus you've got your beautiful buyer letter, plus you've got this, plus you've got this. So it takes a half an hour to put one offer together if you're not fly by night. Like, if you are checking all the boxes and making sure that it is perfect, it takes 20 to 30 minutes to put together one offer.
Yeah. And it is I don't want to discount listing agents, because it is hard work and it is overwhelming and stressful, especially because you do have 50
now
offers coming in. But it's the caveat of, you're not spending the money and gas driving, because there's so much more competition on the buyer's agent side of things. It's not, when you're a listing agent, you're listing that one house and you're bringing in all these offers and you're dealing with that stuff. But as a buyer's agent, you may show one client, like especially if you have a VA or a low income where you're FHA and you need down payment assistance or seller concessions, you may show 20, 30, 40, 50 homes. You may write 10, 15, 20 offers.
I mean, we've had agents who have shown the same people 100 houses.
Yeah. Shoop had that client 100 houses. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Now, the other thing is we want to talk about from that buyer's agent perspective, right? Because the other thing that's going to change is buyer's agents will have to do a buyer's consultation and sign a contract with their buyers. So again, this makes it harder on buyer's agents, because if you are an agent that is buying leads, like you're buying realtor.com, you're buying Zillow, you're buying those leads, a lot of times the way that agents navigate those leads is they don't have a buyer's consult because these leads are going online and they're clicking and going and clicking and going and clicking and going, and they just want to go see the house. So the agents meet them at the house. And then hopefully they're doing a buyer's consult afterwards. But a lot of times they're meeting them at the house and then they're showing them houses, and they don't necessarily always get a contract signed up front. Now, is it always better to do a buyer's consultation and get a contract signed up front? Yes. But is that the way that things have been being done? No, it's not, because it's more difficult for both the client and the agent because of how quickly the market is going. If I'm a buyer and I go on realtor.com and I see 123 Apple Street and I click on it and you answer, Kylie, and you call the listing agent and they're like, it's highest and best due in 3 hours, you need to go meet me there. You don't necessarily have time to say, okay, well, please come to my office and let's do this buyer's consult and let's sign this contract and then we will go over to this house. The way time has been so crunched, it isn't always the most realistic expectation or way of doing things. Now, I am the first person to preach, and if you listen to this podcast often or you know me, you know that I always do buyer's consults with my clients.
Always.
I do not always have them sign a contract before we go out and see houses. Number one, because if they're friends or family, I know that they're going to stick with me and I'm going to close them. And I know there's other agents that would be like, oh, I still would do it. Yeah, I understand that. But it just isn't always the way it's been done. Now it is a non-negotiable. These are 2 non-negotiables that this lawsuit will change: is no compensation on the MLS ticket and must have a buyer's agency contract signed before you go and show them. Now, part of that consultation is going to have to be that conversation. And we've done this in the past, actually, as Elite Realty. So back when the foreclosure market was happening and houses were going for $10.
Yeah.
We already actually have this in place. We have a buyer's loyalty agreement, and in that agreement, it states that if we were not compensated at least $3,000, the buyer would pay whatever the remainder of that would be. So if the bank, it was a bank REO and the bank only paid $1,000, the buyer would compensate the other $2,000 at closing. Because the time and energy that you put into a $10,000 house is the same as a $1 million house. It's the same process. It's the same stress and energy and time, a $10,000 house and a $1 million house. So we want to make sure that we're at least compensated that $3,000 according to that contract. Now, is that negotiable? Absolutely. There's been people that came in and she's like, I'm a single mom. I just got over cancer. I can barely afford this house. There's no possible way I can pay additional commission. Okay, again, it's a negotiable state. And that's the important thing everybody wants to get across with this lawsuit is you can't say it's non-negotiable, you must pay me this $3,000. You have to say, okay, it's negotiable. Where are you at? What can you do? And come to a win-win for the client. And this is where the problem comes up is there are many agents out there who take the stand of, no, if I'm not getting this, then I'm not doing it. And that's where the problems came up.
Yeah, and I can see, there's been plenty of times where, not plenty, but there have been a few times where I have shown my clients homes already where the sellers weren't offering the buyer anything. And I've had to have that conversation. I'm like, listen, client, this is the 10th house we've seen. We've put in a lot of time and effort. And luckily, my clients have been in a place of financial stability and understanding of the work that I'm putting in for them, especially for investors. I'm not just showing them homes. I'm looking at taxes. I'm pulling public records. I'm running rental comps. I'm last night, I handpicked 3 listings for my investors, and it took me over an hour to look at the listing, compare it to the other ones I give them sale comps so they know if they're getting run over. There's so much value that buyers agents bring to the table. It is absolutely ridiculous to think that we should not be paid.
Yeah. And that's the facts. When we break it down in the simplest of forms is realtors are going to have to up their game. You're going to have to be able to sit and have a listing appointment or a buyer's consult where you explain exactly what you do, you show your value proposition, you have it laid out in, here are all the steps I'm going to go through, here are all of the services that I'm going to provide you, where people are like, absolutely. Like my client Lex, who I was talking to earlier, he told me, he's like, I am paying you to utilize your expertise, not to ignore what you're telling me. Whatever you say we need to list this house at is what we're listing this house at. So obviously, like you heard the conversation we had earlier where he was like, I brought in 8 different realtors and I listened to all of their pitches and they told me what they were going to do. And like, you were my girl, Trish. So I had to provide enough value. And I actually didn't know he interviewed. That was news to me. He interviewed 8 other agents. But I came in and I showed him like, here's the graphs, here's the why, here's the this, here's that, here's why this, here's why that, here's why blah, 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 blah. And I'm able to explain why you should give me this compensation, right? Because I'm actually worth more than this. I'm giving you a deal, right? But you have to be able to articulate that, and you have to be able to show them that whether you're on the listing side or you're on the buyer side, you're going to work your butt off. You're going to save them money. Like even though they're compensating you, you're going to save them money from messing around with the listing agent who represents the seller. And that's buyers. You need to remember the listing agent represents the seller. It is their job to get the seller the most money. Going to them is not helping you as a buyer.
That's my favorite, is when people are like, oh, I just want to talk to the listing agent. Oh, I just want to talk to the listing agent. And my line when they call in and asking about stuff is like, okay, well, do you have someone representing your interest? Do you have someone negotiating on your behalf, someone who knows the ins and outs, what you can negotiate on? Because I mean, like we've talked about before, you get that inspection list. And I mean, it's just, riddled with all of the things. And as experienced realtors, we're able to look at this list and say, all right, Samantha, all the big ticket items check off. We've got missing GFIs. We've got missing smoke detectors. So we're just going to, you need someone on your side so you don't get run over and taken advantage of.
Absolutely. So I think the end all be all of all of this is, number one, this situation is still developing. Be super careful where you're getting your news from. Do not listen to all the sensationalism, the fear mongering. The real estate industry has been through so much. We've been able to pivot and flex and make it through. We will again. We are resilient. We will figure it out. Buyers, you still need a buyer's agent. Listing agents, show the value of providing compensation to the buyer's agent so that people like veterans and first-time home buyers don't get squeezed out of this market and totally screwed.
And that is it for us this week. Thank you so much for joining us. Please share this episode. We've got so much information here about what's going on. Subscribe wherever you're at. Come back next week for another episode of Elite Life.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us today on the Elite Life Podcast with Trish and Kylie. Don't forget to share this episode with a friend so we can keep delivering you more fantastic insights on grit, grace, and growth. Stay connected with us on Instagram and Facebook, where we'll keep the ideas flowing to help you build a life you love and leave a legacy you can be proud of. Until next time.